Bring you up to date on the latest developments in America's new war. There's another arrest report for you in Tuesday's terrorist attacks. The Justice Department is telling CNN the FBI has arrested a second material witness. You recall yesterday we told you about the first arrest. That person was arrested after being at John F. Kennedy Airport after having a false pilot certificate, a certificate that was not his. This latest arrestee has not been named, but he is in custody in New York, we are told. President Bush is not mincing words about Osama bin Laden. As we've been telling you at a meeting at Camp David yesterday, Mr. Bush called bin Laden the prime suspect in Tuesday's terrorist attacks, and he said the U.S. would smoke bin Laden out of his hole, his words. Wall Street is reopening tomorrow after the longest shutdown in its history. The market expected to be volatile, as you might expect. Airlines are facing severe losses, and firms like General Electric and Ford are bracing for tough economic conditions. Paula.
All right, Miles, thanks so much. From the platform today, you can't really make out the smoke that continues to billow from the site of what used to be the World Trade Centers. What you're actually seeing this morning is a combination of steam and smoke. Now that rescue workers are able to, day by day, get deeper and deeper into the rubble, air is actually hitting flames, and once that happens, it fuels those flames. 22,000 tons of rubble moved thus far. The FBI now calling this the largest crime scene ever in the United States. You might, if you were with us at the top of the hour, had heard that a passport belonging to one of the hijackers was actually discovered yesterday several blocks away from the crash site. That prompted both the FBI and police to widen the search area beyond the immediate crash site. That's why this is being called the biggest crime scene in American history. I want to show you a picture now that was taken to give you a better idea of just how dramatically the skyline of New York has changed. These are the twin 107-story towers that existed before 8:45 on Tuesday morning. Now, of course, this is what the skyline looks like today. Let's head down to Ground Zero, where Bill Hemmer is deployed today for an update on exactly what is happening in this painstaking process. Hi, Bill.
Paula, good morning to you. Now day 6 down here, and these numbers, if you look at them on the surface, are just absolutely astounding and staggering. 159 confirmed fatalities at this point. They're still looking for 4,972 people in the buildings just about 2.5 blocks south of me. You mentioned 22,000 tons. They think they might, in the end, take out about 500,000 tons before all the rubble is cleared. And one rescuer yesterday who was leaving the site late last night said we're looking at least a month and quite possibly a lot longer than that before everything is cleared out from the rubble and what has been known as the pile here in southern Manhattan. It's been since Wednesday since anyone has been pulled out alive, and certainly that continues the dim hopes for those who are holding on to hope, to the possibility that some may be found inside here. I want to bring in Nancy Rutherford, a spokesperson with the American Red Cross here, who's been on the scene since Wednesday here in Lower Manhattan. Nancy, good morning to you. You were in Oklahoma City back in 1995. You were also in Western India in January this past year, where that devastating earthquake hit. You say there are similarities between those two events and what we're seeing here. Tell us how.
There are so many similarities, but also some differences. The similarities are the sense of vulnerability that we felt in Oklahoma City because of not having any control over what happened. In an earthquake situation, they had the trucks taking out the debris over and over and over. But in all three of these, the same look in the family's eyes as they're waiting for news of their loved one. Lots of tears, swollen eyes, firefighters holding out hope, rescue workers working endless hours.
What do you tell people, knowing that you're in contact with a lot of the counselors and grief counselors who are here on the scene? Knowing that it's now day 6, no one has come out alive since Wednesday, and even at this point, you say in India back in January, still people were coming out alive, being found inside their homes trapped.
They were, and you know, that's why their hope is warranted, I think. There were extenuating circumstances. There were a woman who had 3 tomatoes with her in her trapped little area, and that helped her survive for days. I think it was day 9 or 10 when they finally brought her out. So there's still some hope.
When you talk to the rescuers who are in there working on many times 12, 14, 18-hour shifts, what difficulties are they having?
I think the hardest thing for them is walking away from it. I think they want to be there. They tell us such a sense of family, and they want to be there and don't want to give up on their family. So getting them out and having them take some rest, they're so fatigued, and they're also trying not to think about it. They're trying to keep their energy level up and trying not to relive or rethink what they're going through, so they can have the strength to go on.
Keep fighting the good fight, okay? Nancy Rutherford with the American Red Cross this morning. Last night, we started to see again more signs of life trickling back to normalcy here in southern Manhattan. And tomorrow, 9:30 a.m., the opening bell of the New York Stock Exchange will go off again. Another sign that things will start to take root again, and the Stock Exchange, such a pillar of strength in this country. Greg Clarkin now on what's happening on the markets and what we may expect going into tomorrow.
The opening bell is expected to sound on Wall Street Monday morning, breaking the silence that has blanketed the New York Stock Exchange since Tuesday's terrorist attacks. Sitting just a few blocks east of what was the World Trade Center, the NYSE has been covered in ash, but the grime is now washed away, replaced by an American flag. After hours of testing its internal systems Saturday, Chairman Richard Grasso declared all systems go and vowed Monday's opening bell would be rich in symbolism.
To send a very important message to the criminals who so heinously attacked this country, that they've lost. The American way of life goes on, business recommences.
The NYSE sustained no major structural damage, and inside the more than 100-year-old building, technicians tested the systems linking brokerages to the exchange, and the results have been encouraging.
We are very pleased with the progress that all of the firms have made, particularly our major firms who account for the lion's share of the order flow here.
Uptown, the NASDAQ has run tests of its own and termed those results terrific. It too vows to begin trading Monday morning. As for the American Stock Exchange, it suffered damage to its building and will trade out of the NYSE. The exchange and the city of New York have worked to restore access to the financial district. Once there, employees will find even tighter security around the NYSE, and everything from counselors to deal with trauma to surgical masks to deal with dust will be readily available. Greg Clarkin, CNN Financial News, New York.
And as Greg was mentioning, we do expect a number of subway stops to be open, but still many are closed in the southern end of Manhattan, and the traffic will be limited. No private traffic, we're told, tomorrow when Wall Street does open. At 9:30 a.m. or shortly before there, we're expecting a 2-minute moment of silence, followed by the singing of God Bless America. When the opening bell does sound, very symbolic, the Treasury Secretary, Paul O'Neill, will be there to ring it. Also, a number of New York Fire Department and New York police officers will be there as well. In addition to that, the Port Authority from New York and New Jersey expected to have people on the podium above the trading floor. About 3,000 traders on a normal day work there, and about 1,500 other staff members of the New York Stock Exchange. Dick Grasso yesterday was indicating he expects all of those to show up for work tomorrow. We shall see, though, again, 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time, when another sign of life comes back to this part of a devastated New York City. Paula, back to you.
All right, thanks so much, Bill. We have talked a lot over the last couple of days about how flexible the city has been in trying to allow support staff into that perimeter area surrounding the World Trade Center to provide encouragement to those who still have hope their loved ones will be found in this rubble. And among those folks are three brothers I'm going to introduce you to now: Father Conrad Osterhout, Brother Damiano Vasade, and Brother Isaiah Loboto. Welcome to you all. Now, some of you actually got into Ground Zero. Some of you were at that gate that marks the entrance to Ground Zero. Brother Damiano, what did you see when you got inside?
I saw a lot of wreckage and destruction beyond anything I imagined beforehand, beyond description. I saw a lot of people helping, tons of volunteers, fire and police, all assisting. Really saw how charity and suffering are united. And in the midst of it all, I think God is showing us a new way to love. And it's beautiful to see that in all this suffering and all this destruction, love still exists. And there is charity that is overcoming. And it's the light in all this.
Father, what do you think you've been able to give back? People are suffering very deeply. People are questioning a God that, if you believe in God, that could allow for something so evil to happen. Even Reverend Billy Graham expressed that in his sermon the other day. People are struggling with their faith. What are you giving back?
Well, the word is encourage, to give courage to one another, to see that evil and suffering coexist with good and with, as Brother was talking about, love. And one officer came to us, he said, brothers, we are standing at the line in the place of ground zero between good and evil. But when we come out and see you, we realize that we are covered with prayer. And we have to ask the question, what is evil? You know, and for us, it's linked to sin. Men and women sin, the world, there's society's sins. We ourselves as a society have to account for certain sins and difficulties. And God wants us to recognize, I think, at this time, that He is helping us, that good is in the midst of this, that He is working for our behalf. We're encouraging, that is giving courage to people. And if we ask what is evil and what is sin, the real horror here is that human life has been lost. And we recognize human life, even from its beginning, conception, to its end, is sacred.
Brother Isaiah, you have not only come into contact with folks that are working around the clock to find folks that are missing and in hopes of rescuing them. You have seen family members flood into the area, trying to grasp onto any little bit of information they can get. Give us an idea of what kind of response you've gotten and the level of this nightmarish experience these folks are living.
You could see it in the eyes of the people, you know, the men, the courageous men, just they're tired, exhausted, but at the same time come up and admit their faith in Jesus and say, you know, I was raised Catholic or I was raised Christian. I'm definitely going to church on Sunday. You know, today is the Lord's Day. And there's great hope, you know, when they see us, they say, thank you for being here. There's not much you can do in time of tremendous suffering like this, but to be present, to be a sign of God's love and mercy, His presence with us right now, you know, to convey the Lord's mercy in a situation like this, that Jesus suffers with us. When he went to the cross, He suffered just like this. I
want to get a shot of something that I have in my hand, Father, that you've given me, and it's a picture and an inscription, obviously that a young child did. What is the significance of this, and why did you bring this here this morning? This
Image of asking for a blessing to those who have been volunteers has been a donation from families in Lyndhurst, New York. And a young boy has drawn this and attached it to a package of candy that he wanted to give to the volunteers and to encourage them and to give them a blessing. It symbolizes that this has affected everybody, even our children, and we really have to teach our children something about, you know, having courage in the midst of suffering.
The downside of this enormous amount of support and outpouring of love that New Yorkers have shown and Americans all across the country is that the city has been overwhelmed by donations, and right now they're simply, then the Red Cross is simply asking for cash. So many supplies have been donated, they've got no place to store them. For a final question, I want some thoughts of all of you about the difficulty, the task of the rescue workers down there. Now, we know those folks are instinctively trained to do what they do. Do you think they're getting the level of support they deserve?
Well, it is difficult to reach so many, and they do need a lot of support. I think particularly they need to have the encouragement of faith, to be honest with you, because they can get counseling, but the presence of symbols of faith, the confidence that this depends on something far greater than ourselves, is very important at this hour. And I really believe that we're facing the possibility of war very clearly. And people are grieving already, seeing this horror. It's not buildings, it's people, the human loss. And we're facing the possibility of a greater human loss. As Mother Teresa put it, war is poverty. It creates poverty. There will be a great poverty on the earth because of the loss of life, the human life, which is so precious.
Well, I thank you all three for joining us here this morning and for sharing some of what you've experienced down there, a place that a lot of folks never want to go to, never want to see what you saw. Continued good luck.
Amen.
Thank you.
God bless you, Paula.
Thank you very much. Let's go back to John King, who continues to join us from the Capitol right now. There you are. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning again to you, Paula, and thank you. I want to bring in now our Bob Franken, who's been keeping post over at the Pentagon overnight. Bob, let's start with a question. I drove by the Pentagon late last night and again early this morning outside. A great deal of activity around the clock. What's the latest on the search effort and the recovery effort outside?
Well, the search effort, of course, is producing a continuing addition to the bad news. They're estimating that there will be 188 people who will be found dead in the Pentagon, including those who are on the airplane. They are now up to 86. Overnight, they found one more body. The remains now are at 86. Of course, the families were allowed to come by the building yesterday, supported by a lot of grief counselors and the like, to establish a makeshift memorial of flowers and balloons as they continue the vigil which, of course, has such a sad ending to this story. And, of course, the story goes on in other parts of the building with the military planning, John.
Bob, we just had a retired general, Tom McKierney, on the air a short time ago. He was talking about the various options, using Diego Garcia, using ground troops going through Pakistan. Any sense over there of the depth and the level of the military planning underway at this hour?
It's intense, no question about it. The first thing they are dealing with, of course, is the placement of the reserve units and the selection of which specific units are going to be included in the call-up of 35,000 units involving all the Defense Department forces and the Coast Guard, which is under another cabinet department. Those plans are being laid out. The individuals and the units are being notified. They're going to be used for homeland defense. Of course, that is not the main focus. The main focus is the retaliation. And as we found out yesterday, the administration's plan to wage a long, quote, war against terrorism. But that's going to involve, as the general said, many things. It's going to involve very surgical operations, but sometimes the brute force that the United States can have with its 2.5 million plus members of the military.
Another thing the President, and I'm sure the Pentagon, would very much like is continued evidence of strong public support. Any sense over there? The President obviously used the words, "we're at war" yesterday. Blunt statement trying to prepare the American people. Any effort over at the Pentagon as well to try to build public support, even as they get about the nuts and bolts of military planning?
Well, it seems quite businesslike here, but the Pentagon sort of goes through these cyclical periods of support, and then, of course, there was a period when there was anything but support, and oftentimes right now the military is just ignored. But at the moment, the morale at the Pentagon is high in the sense that it realizes it has a mission, there's a focus, and so the people at the Pentagon feel like that they are really now the most relevant organization in government, and that's the sense you get as you talk with them.
All right, Bob Franken standing by at the Pentagon. We thank you very much. Now, as the President tries to build an international coalition to fight what he bluntly calls a war, European countries are showing their support for the United States in the wake of Tuesday's attacks. A ceremony held today at the Rota Air Naval Base in southern Spain. That base was used as a key staging point for troops and equipment during the Persian Gulf War. Today's ceremony honored the victims of Tuesday attacks and sent the message that Spain stands ready to fight with the United States. Now back to Paula Zahn in New York.
John, before I let you go, I know I've had a lot of questions for you today, and a large number of folks in our audience have questions too to ask you and to ask Bill Hemmer and our other correspondents that are going to be with us throughout the morning. So right now, I just wanted to prepare you for that, John. I wanted to put up on the screen right now an email address where you can email your questions for us to answer. We'll take a stab at them at attack@cnn.com. We would love to handle as many of them as we could get to, so please join us in the 8 o'clock hour for that. Just some quick New York notes here. We have learned that St. Patrick's Cathedral, which of course is the largest cathedral here in New York City, will be holding a special Mass tonight at 5:30 to honor all of those whose lives have been lost here in the city. And then again tomorrow night at 5:30, a special service will be held to honor specifically the firefighters, the police, and the rescue workers who have lost their lives and those that continue to face enormous risks as they go about their job. Wanted to quickly show you a shot of the Statue of Liberty this morning. The World Trade Centers, of course, used to be the tallest buildings in New York City. Now the Statue of Liberty has that moniker. Apparently, there is such a strong... well, actually, I haven't seen the Empire State Building yet, but nevertheless, it's not too far here from our CNN platform in Midtown Manhattan. But apparently people have lined up over the last several days and waited in line for a long time to get up to the observation deck, that is, to get their view of the scene south of here. Right now, I'm going to head to Afghanistan, where our reporter Steve Hartigan is standing by with the very latest from there. What are the latest developments this morning?
Paul, a very dramatic day here in northern Afghanistan. This is about 5% of the country that's still controlled by the opposition. These people are fighting the ruling Taliban from Kabul. A very dramatic day here because today they buried their leader, Ahmed Shah Massoud, the Afghani general who fought the Soviets and then fought the Taliban, was assassinated recently. He was assassinated immediately before the terrorist attacks against the United States. His supporters here say the two events are linked. They are calling for military intervention by the United States in Afghanistan, and they say they want to play a role in that coming fight that perhaps might happen against the Taliban. Paula?
Steve, realistically, what kind of role could they play?
Well, they estimate their own forces at about 15,000 regulars and perhaps about 15,000 more fighters who would join the fight. They are saying that they have experience in fighting the Taliban and in locating Taliban officials, that they have been fighting the Taliban for years, that they have lost thousands of their own people in the fight, and that they would want to play a role as Afghanis in the fight. But realistically, they are in a tough position. They've been driven back here to the north. They control just about 5% of this incredibly remote region. And they say so far contacts with the United States have been minimal, but they are calling for strikes, for military strikes against their own nation. Paula?
Steve, even as familiar as these rebel leaders are with the geography of Afghanistan, do they acknowledge as well, as much as they'd like to help, how difficult it will be to isolate Osama bin Laden and his followers?
Certainly they do acknowledge how difficult it is, and the fighting here has been going on, as you know, for decades, the on and off war between the Northern Alliance here and the Taliban. And also before that, as you remember, the Soviet Union tried for 10 years to fight here and win. As we see a helicopter fly by us now, they've been buzzing by all day. All around these villages, you see the scarred remains of Soviet tanks, Soviet armored personnel carriers, really monuments to the failure of trying to fight a war in Afghanistan.
Steve, given where you are in the country, I don't know how much reaction from Afghanis you've been able to process, but what can you tell us about the Pakistanis now saying that they are urging the Taliban to deliver Osama bin Laden to them sometime within the next 3 days? We know a high-level delegation from Pakistan will actually be traveling to Afghanistan to deliver that ultimatum.
Right. Well, as on the part of the Northern Alliance, that's the opposition group here that controls about 5% of the country, there's really a great deal of skepticism towards Pakistan. They see Pakistan really as an extension of the Taliban, really as the enemy. We've spoken to high officials here among the opposition, and they are giving clear to the United States, do not trust Pakistan. As a matter of fact, they say one way to close down the Taliban, one of the most successful ways of fighting against the Taliban, according to them, would be to close the supply of arms from Pakistan to the Taliban. So some real sharp warnings here from the Afghan opposition not to trust Pakistan. Paula?
Steve, I know earlier this morning Tom Mantier was reporting that now that there is an expectation that there will be war, he was reporting from Islamabad, Pakistan, that perhaps as many as a couple 100,000 people will try to flee Afghanistan. Have you seen any signs of people trying to get out?
Well, here from the north, we have not seen signs of refugees trying to flee. It's almost on the contrary here. We've seen a real hope, a real expectation of moving forward. The fighters here say, although their numbers are limited, that they want to move forward towards Kabul, that they hope that this crisis could prove an opportunity for them, an opportunity to retake at least a greater share of what they say is their country.
Steve Harrigan, thank you so much for that latest update. We will get back to you throughout the morning. Right now, I head back to Atlanta, and that's where Miles continues to stand by with more on what this war effort might look like. Hi, Miles.
Hello, Paula. Leaders in several countries have pledged their support to the United States. This morning, CNN's chief international correspondent, Christiane Amanpour, spoke with British Prime Minister Tony Blair. He said Britain stands strong with the U.S. in the face of terrorism.
I'm very pleased at the way that America and the American administration has gone out of its way to consult its allies, to keep us fully informed so that we are part of the deliberations they're making. But we have to do two things, in my view. First of all, there has to be a response to bring those terrorists who committed this attack to account, and we will play our full part in that. And secondly, there has then to be an agenda that we construct at an international level that involves the whole of the international community in dismantling the machinery of international terrorism, how it's financed, how these people move about the world, the countries that then harbour them and give them help. At every single level, we have to pursue and dismantle this machinery of terror. And that is important, not just for the purpose of bringing those people to account, but also in order to make sure that this does not happen again. Well, we've made it very clear that we stand side by side with the United States. And it's not a question of the United States simply saying, this is what we're going to do now, come and join us. The US is in close consultation with us and with other allies, and I think there will be a very broad support for a response that allows us to pursue and bring to account those responsible for this act, and do it as an act of justice. It's fairly clear where the evidence is tending, but I think it is important that we consider the evidence in a very careful way, that it's factually based, that we are hard-headed about it, but once we have come to a conclusion, then it is important that we hold those people who are responsible for this, as I say, to account. And I think you will find, incidentally, that that is the view right round the world. I've spoken to Arab leaders in the past few days that have expressed their outrage at what has happened, their determination that this should be seen as something that the world of Islam is standing against, not merely countries like America and the United Kingdom. And I think you will find that there is enormous support for the idea that we must put together a broad-based coalition that hound these people down and that bring them to account, and do it, as I say, for reasons of justice. We owe it to those people that lost their lives, to their families who are grieving, and to our own defence of democracy and liberty and freedom.
The terrorist attacks have sparked a flame of patriotism in a generation of Americans unaccustomed to displaying pride in their country or their government. CNN's Jason Bellini with that.
For a generation accustomed to fleeting fashion statements, for the moment, it's hip to be wearing the flag.
We drove in and we were saying we've never even done this on the 4th of July, like get dressed up.
Young people are flocking to nightly vigils around New York City, expressing a mix of emotions, including one that many from the X and Y generations have never felt before: patriotism, pride in being American, pride in their government.
I know in my particular case I've had a lot of issues with the U.S. government in the past. I mean, I'm gay, and they don't do a very good job, I think, of, you know, supporting and including their gay citizens. And this is the first time I've really been able to look at the government in an, you know, important situation and say they're doing a great job, and I'm glad to have them.
Older Americans have long wondered, do these kids have it in them? The love of country, the willingness to sacrifice. Having grown up in safe and privileged times, the under 30 crowd admits they've never been tested.
As a generation, we don't really have anything that brings us together because there hasn't been one world event that would do it for us.
Older Americans also have wondered whether their MTV generation compatriots know how to be serious, to not be cynical. Do young people care about anything other than that which directly affects them?
MTV apparently thinks so. It switched to network news coverage the day of the disaster.
This is really unprecedented television.
TRL, the popular video countdown program with host Carson Daly, for the first time in its history, played not a single video.
Let's celebrate the gift of life.
You hear a lot of kids, all like, oh, the government sucks and blah, blah. But right now, I'm very proud to be, a voting member of our United States government.
Will the ADD generation lose interest quickly? MTV News reporter John Norris thinks not.
The idea of sacrifice, the idea of a threatening world is
it's foreign to them. And I'm afraid that this week may be on the brink of a real fundamental change in the kind of world we live in.
Never pretty much like the ways of America and like people around here and just America itself. Today, there was no reason not to be proud of the whole thing because of how people reacted to it,
For the younger generation, patriotism stoked not necessarily by tragedy itself, but by the way Americans react when the time comes. Jason Bellini, CNN, New York.